Welcome. This is Record Keeping for Organic Livestock Producers. My name is Kyla Parmelee. I am a certification specialist with Vermont Organic Farmers. I primarily work with dairy farms and I'm the livestock lead. So today, our goal is to understand organic record keeping requirements and what they look like in real life. So I'm going to do an overview of the record keeping requirements for organic livestock. And then we have a couple farmers who've joined us today, and they're going to review their record keeping systems and show us some examples of how they keep records. And then we're going to share some resources with you, and then we'll have some time at the end for some questions and answers. So if you have any questions, just hold on to those till the end. All right. So why do the organic rules require records? Record keeping is a big part of being organic. So the regulatory purpose is records allow us, a third party, to verify what's happening on your farm. So they provide evidence to help show that you're meeting the organic regulations. So not only do they serve a regulatory purpose, there's also a very practical benefit to you and your business as well. When you have a well set up record keeping system, it can help you understand your business more clearly. Also, good records can protect you. It offers proof of compliance if there's ever any questions. And then it can also help you be more efficient and make smarter decisions, just having that historical records to refer to. So what is a record? A record is any information in written, visual, or electronic form that is going to document your activities, what's going on your farm. So your record keeping system should be adaptable to your business. We really want you to use a system that works best for you. Again, records help improve efficiency and profitability. It's a great tool to have. Today, I'm going to provide you in my portion of the presentation with some of our templates that we provide to our producers. These are just templates. They're not required to be used, but they are great reference for you to kind of see what requirements should be in your records and what the inspector is going to be looking for at your inspection. That said, there's a lot of other templates available too. You can find a lot online. And like I said, the record keeping system should work best for you. So you're welcome to adapt and make your own templates as well. And again, the goal of this record keeping and keeping a good record keeping system is so that we, as a third party auditor, can have a complete understanding of what's going on your farm. So records are really verified at your annual inspection. So what are inspectors looking for? So again, typically the records are reviewed at your inspection. Usually they're looking at records since your last inspection from the previous year. You are required, though, to keep records for 5 years. So no matter what, you should keep those historical records. That is part of the requirements. So what is the inspector looking for at the inspection? They want to see records that are going to show compliance with the regulations. And it really helps if they're complete and organized and able to be audited by us, a third party. So as part of the inspection, there are 2 required audit exercises. There is a traceability audit. So for livestock, this is going to typically be an origin of livestock check. So they're going to take a group of animals or some animals and trace them through your record keeping system to make sure that you're keeping all the records to preserve their identity. And then the other audit that occurs at inspection is a mass balance audit. So this is looking at typically the quantity of feed that you purchased or that you grew. I'm going to compare that to the amount of feed that you fed out or used. So getting into the regulations, we've got livestock feed is the first section. This is 205, 237. So the first part of these requirements is in your organic system plan or your OSP, also known as your application, you will describe your total feed ration for each type and class of animal. So this is you're going to report your rations, what you're feeding on a per animal basis by your animal group. Also in your application, you're going to include all the feed that is produced on your farm. So at the inspection, this will be verified through your harvest records. You're also going to report in your application all of the feed that's purchased off farm. And at inspection, this is going to be verified through your purchase records and again, that organic certificate. And then you also, in your application, are going to report your feed supplements and additives. And at your inspection, that will be verified through your purchase receipts. You also are required to document the amount of each type of feed that is fed to each animal group. So this would be your ration records as fed ration records. And then you also are required to document seasonal ration changes. So this would be, during the summer, once you start grazing, your ration's going to change. You need to make sure that you write that down when and what the ration is. Same thing, during the grazing season, later in the summer, you might supplement some more forage. You should write down that ration change as well. And then the last part of this section of the rule is that you have to provide the method for calculating your dry matter demand and your dry matter intake. And we actually just recorded a resource on this that Zia will put in the chat. There's a YouTube video we made that covers kind of this DMD, how to calculate DMI and the ration records requirements specifically. All right, origin of livestock. This is 205-236 of the organic regulations. So this part is the requirement is that you must maintain records sufficient to preserve the identity of all organically managed animals. So like I said earlier, this is usually done through your animal traceability audit. The records that they'll be looking at for this is your animal ID list, your healthcare records, purchase and sales records, and then any cull records. So here is an example of an animal ID list. This is more applicable to ruminants. So the requirements for your animal ID list is you should document their ID, whether that's a name, number, both, any number associated with them if you have those metal tags or an RFID tag and a barn name, you should document all their IDs on there. Birth date, if they're born on farm, their dam. If you purchase them, then you should include the source, the farm that they came from. And then another important part is the organic slaughter eligibility. This should be tracked on your animal ID list. So any animals that have been managed organically from the last third of their gestation and not treated with any parasiticides would qualify as organic slaughter. And then it is also good to note, when they're removed from the herd. So any death, sale, or slaughter dates. And then I work with a lot of dairy farmers, so I tend to talk mostly about ruminants. That's what I'm experienced with, but I just included an example of some poultry records. Animal ID for poultry is a little different. You're not going to ID each individual bird. That would be a bit much. So it's more based upon the flock and maybe, that stage of life and the production. So here's just an example of some poultry records, where they're tracking it by the flock. All right, so livestock care and production practices standards. This is 205-238. This section is pretty much the healthcare section. So products must be allowed for use in organic production. That is really important to note that you can find approved lists for healthcare materials that are approved for organic use. Any healthcare treatments should be recorded in your records. You can use a standard operating procedure or an SOP. This is often done for routine things. If you have a protocol for dehorning that they're done at 2 weeks old, then you could have an SOP for that, or anything like vaccines, or if you have a fresh cow protocol, that could be in an SOP. And then this is a newer section of the rule, so I just wanted to mention it. You also have to have a plan for euthanasia, parasite management, and then for monitoring lameness. These are usually included in your application organic system plan. And then here is an example of our healthcare records template. You should document the date that the treatment was done, the ID of the animal, what was the issue, what did you treat them with, and then, if you used a vet or not. If you did use a vet, you should keep those vet slips. That's another form of documentation that the inspector will like to look at. And then, for dairy, if there's any withholding, milk withhold, you should document that as well. Um, so that is healthcare records. And then this is also a new section of the rule. They made 205, 241. So this is living conditions specific for poultry. I just wanted to note this section specifically because there are now indoor and outdoor space requirements. And the big thing record keeping wise for this is you are now required to monitor ammonia levels. So you do have to keep a record of that. And then any temporary confinement. So anytime you have to keep, the birds inside, you should document that as well. So this leads us into the ruminant and non-ruminant livestock living conditions. So specifically for record keeping, this is mostly temporary confinement. Daily outdoor access and access to pasture during the grazing season is required for all animals over 6 months for ruminants. There are instances where you can keep animals temporarily confined. I didn't list them here, but you can see them in VOF. We have our guidelines, they list them, or here's the NOP rule section. We do require documentation of periods of temporary confinement. So if you have to keep animals in for one of those allowed instances, you should document the date of that confinement or dates, which animals or group, and then why they were confined. All right, last part of the rules. So 205, 240, this is the pasture practice or the pasture rule. So this is an average of 30% of dry matter intake from pasture over the grazing season with a minimum of 120 days. For this, it's important to keep records of your grazing season dates. So, you should write down when the cows went out to pasture and then, when you barned them up and started feeding that winter ration. Grazing records are a really helpful tool, keeping track of when your cows were in a paddock, how long, what the grass height was. That will help inspectors kind of get a feeling for the pasture rule and if you're in compliance with it. And then, like I said earlier, with the ration records, it's important to document any supplemental feeding or changes to the ration during the grazing season, often due to the weather or things like that. So speaking of the weather, I did want to mention the pasture variance, which is a tool that is available for certified producers. So in instances of natural disaster, like for example, this year where we've had a drought or flooding, and you causes you to not be able to meet that pasture rule. Maybe your grass isn't growing back or your field's flooded. You can get a variance for that year to the pasture rule. This is something, though, that does need to be requested from the NOP, the National Organic Program. But your certifier can do this for you, but you do have to give the information to your certifier. So it does require some documentation. The NOP is going to want to see evidence of why you need this variance. So it's important to keep purchase receipts for any extra forage you've had to buy. And then again, this is where those ration records are really important. So you can show, any extra supplemental feeding you've had to do outside of, a normal year. All right. And then, so the not so fun part, but also an important part of this process is non-compliances or adverse action. We always remind ourselves this program, we're really focused on continual improvement. No one's perfect, right? We are all human beings who make mistakes. There are a lot of requirements. You can't always meet all of them necessarily in all times. So to address this, there is a non-compliance process. This process is dictated by the National Organic Program, so it's in the regulations. It's out of our hands. It's a process that we have to follow. We as certifiers, we also receive non-compliances from the National Organic Program, so it goes both ways. Um, there is a specified time frame for a response. So what will happen is in the final review, if there was any potential issues, the certification specialist like me would write those up as issues, and usually there'll be an ask in there for something from you so to address that issue and resolve it. So you have to pay attention to that deadline because there is a due date for that. So the process, once you receive a noncompliance, you can correct it by responding and providing a resolution, or there also is the option to rebut it. So say you might not agree with it, then you can rebut it. If the certifier disagrees with either your correction or resolution or the rebuttal, then what we'll do is we will move the next step in adverse action process, which is a proposed suspension. And then at that point, there will be an opportunity where you can mediate with the certifier to kind of discuss those issues more. Or you have the option to appeal that decision at the higher level of the NOP. So, big picture, we really do want to work with you. We want to make sure that you understand what your options are and understand what the issue is. Often certification specialists were very computer desk-based, and then you have the inspectors who are out there doing the on-the-ground work, kind of the eyes, ears, brain. So, there is a lot of potential between the three of us to have miscommunication. So, it's always really important, if you ever have questions or need to clarify, just call your certification specialist. We're here. We want to work with you. So just want to emphasize that. And then important reminders. Like I said, no one is perfect. Your record keeping system, we don't expect perfection. We're all human. Errors will happen. Again, that's why we like to think of continual improvement. If things are getting sticky in the inspection and, you guys are kind of crossing hairs, not really getting on the same page, it's really good to ask questions. Ask the inspector, why? Why do you need this record? Like, it's good to understand that bigger picture of why we are, requiring these records. So you can ask questions, you can ask um, clarifying questions because often you might have the record but maybe not in the form necessarily that the inspector might be expecting to see. Every farm is different. And we really do, I can't emphasize this enough, we really want the record keeping system to work best for you. So again, there's all the stress on records. This is how we verify it. But also, you're doing so much on your farm day to day beyond the record keeping, just observing and there's more to it than just the records. There's the bigger picture too. So yeah, I think with that, that is my section. So I will kick it off to Zia to introduce.
Thanks so much, Kyla. For those attending live, please do put questions in the chat, and we have reserved time at the end for a little Q&A. All right. People always ask, what do real life records look like? And as Kyla emphasized, there's no one way that they need to look. They need to work for you, and then they need to work for a third party to understand your operation. So in putting this together, we really wanted to have voices of farmers in this webinar and to see some real life examples. So I am pleased to introduce Sam Walsh from Martin Family Farm, who is going to share some of her record keeping.
Hi guys, happy to be here. So this is what I used in 2025, obviously. It's got a monthly and then a weekly, which I thought I would utilize more, but I'll likely switch back to either use the NOFA calendar or I just included a picture of a large desk calendar, which I think is the third slide.
Sam,
Um,
sorry, can I interrupt you for a second? I should have asked. Do you mind giving a little bit of an introduction and background to your
oh,
farm?
who I am?
Yeah, well, yeah, who you are and what
Happy to.
what you're raising on your farm and stuff.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So for about 15 years, we managed certified organic dairy, for our parents, shipping to Horizon and then Organic Valley. Since then, we're transitioning to beef and we do raw milk as well. And I go to this past summer was my first year doing the farmers markets, which has actually been really great. And people really do want our products. So I'm glad that we made the decisions we did. It's nice to actually get out and see and talk to people. And I did markets in Chelsea, South Royalton, and Barrie, and then some in Montpelier. And I was fascinated by how much the smaller markets people seemed equally as motivated to buy local products as Montpelier I kind of thought was like the pinnacle of going to the markets, and it was interesting that that wasn't quite so much the case. I actually sold most of my beef shares through the South Royalton market, which is really great. So we run about 60 head of cattle right now. We used to run closer to 110, and I've noticed a huge difference in the land base, just being able to recover more quickly. And thank God that we did that with the floods and the droughts recently. So mainly cattle, and then hay production. So on this monthly, you'll see I was doing a little bit of keeping track of how much hay was sold. I don't find that I've used it that much, so I'll probably, like I said, just go back to the full monthly calendar. And I keep everything on a main calendar right now. So if you go to the weekly slide, uh, like there's a note on haylage there. If the cows stayed in, I write it down here. I did make an extra note, you'll see on the 19th, that I had purchased a cow. That should also be on my DHIA records. So some of it is repetitive, but I like to be able to go to, maybe two different spots and get the same information. And that when I can keep up with it, that's been really helpful during our inspections too. And I think you just don't know what you need until you've gone through a couple inspections. And the inspector that I've had the last couple of years has been fantastic. So any feed changes are on here. I also have manure spreading records and haying records as well. And I haven't had much. So that's a wall calendar that I like that I used the previous year. There's just lots of different places for notes, and you can write a little bit larger.
Can you read out some of the notes?
So this is actually, I've been using this as a cash calendar, but like bedding, and hay sales are on here as well. Yeah. So this is a DHIA sheet. We haven't used DHIA in years, but I find that I really like to use this more as like so when we were dairying, I would fill one of these out sometimes like in 2 to 3 months, and now things are a little more seasonal. So like this one started on September 1st. So all I have is pretty much slaughter records. There's not a bunch of room, but you can see I do have Aurora down there at the bottom when I purchased her as well. And then I have, we had a conventional bull that should actually be highlighted in pink, and he was on-farm slaughter. And then if I know the hanging weights, I also put it on this sheet, and that makes it a little bit easier for me if I want to figure out, like cost of production. I have it written down on here so I can look back at like a snapshot in time more so. And then all of my calving records, primarily we're calving May and June right now, so that will all be, up above on the calving information and new animals. So I guess that brings us to this beautiful slide. I did not used to do this. This was a recommendation by our certifier. So I have everything I need here, including the organic slaughter status. Cows that are highlighted are just for me as far as cows that are in the raw milk herd. So that's more for myself. So when I have a new set of calves born, I put them below, like Grape. Her cow Gray is right below her with the date. And then but primarily I put this all in at once. And I'll print this from time to time and make notes on it. And then when I need to go back into my Word document, I can just make changes and then print out a new copy. Calving seasonally helps me be a little bit better about that too. And then the next slide is any conventional animals. I do pink. And like I said, I should have had Simba highlighted there that he was slaughtered because he's obviously no longer on this. And then we have boarded cattle, and those guys all have ear tags now. And they're eating organic feed. So they're here. These are either a steer, two steers are being raised out, and then the other two are pets of our friends that are probably going to live here until they die. It's not very practical, but at least there's only 4 of them. Yeah, I guess that's it. Thank you guys.
Those are really great examples. If folks have questions for Sam, we will take them at the end. Great. We have Zach from Cross Farm, who raises various things, but I think you're going to talk about poultry. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Zach. Operate Cross Farm in Barnet, and we've been certified since I think 2016. We raise about 2,000 meat birds, 200 turkeys, and then we're also a handful of pigs, like finish like 10 to 20, and keep sows and do AI breeding. As well as we raise sheep, grass-fed lamb, but we were once certified for those, but we're not anymore. And so, yeah, I just thought I'd share some record keeping for our poultry today. But like generally for record keeping for the different enterprises, the pigs and the poultry and sheep, just to keep things organized, I keep a 3-ring binder for each enterprise. And so that way, like the records aren't getting mixed up and everything is sort of organized that way. I suppose I can share some slides here. All right, is that working?
Perfect.
Okay. So we raise so this is gonna be record keeping for Cornish cross broilers. We raise them right now currently in groups of 500 and 4 groups per season. And so this is the slides I'll share, like basically like what makes up a complete packet for each group at the end of the season, so that all the information that's required for certification is all gathered together for each production group. So like our front page is just our purchase receipt, right? So we're purchasing day-old chicks, so that, you know, this is for the traceability. And then we have our handy feed purchase template from VOF. And we are mostly bulk purchase feed, which you'll see at the top of the page. And then we also do some purchase bag feed from store in town. And so like this sort of template, I don't necessarily fill this out every time we make a purchase. I'll maybe do it monthly or so, just keeping track of the receipts, and then sort of have a summary on here as the season progresses of feed purchased. And then so what I've found that works really well for myself is with the meat birds, we're doing chores for them twice a day. That's moving their shelters, water, and feed morning and evening. So it's convenient to have this record sheet that is broken out for each day of their production cycle, which for us is 8 weeks. And so I will fill this in daily. So this here is what we use for feed records. So anytime we bring feed, we use bulk feeders on pasture, 50-pound feeders. So yeah, just the day that we feed, we'll record the amount and the type of feed because you use a few different kinds. And it's also convenient to like write certain notes on here. So like if you see like on June 27th, like that is when the grain in our bin was out. And then that's when I used the rest of the grain that had been in that bin that had previously bagged and then started new delivery on the 28th. And then we can, then I total the feed for each week. Yep. And then with meat birds, it's really important to keep mortality records because losses do happen. And so again, because we're doing chores twice a day, I'll record any mortality losses in the morning and in the evening, and then total it for the day and then the week, and then have a total number of birds starting out for each week. And these records, so what makes it convenient for me to do this on a daily basis is we also have livestock guardian dogs who I feed kibble twice a day. So like these worksheets I keep next to their dog food because I'm going to go there every day and get their food and put it in a bucket and bring it out and bring it back. So the record sheet is like right there for me to fill out. And then we do processing at Maple Wind Farm, USDA processing. And so then this is just a copy of the processing receipt. So it has the number of birds that were processed. And again, that's, for the traceability. And then we use all those records to do sort of group enterprise analysis. And this is kind of where how you can use your record keeping to do sort of business analysis. So we can sort of analyze each group and see, how we're doing, their feed conversion ratio, see if that's gone way up, maybe there's a problem, what's the issue, or if we change feed types, we can see how that affects grow out. And then also, I can use it to play with sort of retail product pricing and how I change things, how that affects bottom line and stuff like that. And this is a spreadsheet that I've made for myself. I like spreadsheets a lot. Yeah, so that's sort of how we do that.
Great, thanks, Zach. Spreadsheets are very helpful. Again, we'll emphasize that you don't need to use a spreadsheet if folks are not feeling super tech savvy. All right. So thank you both, Sam and Zach, for sharing. It's really, really helpful to see your records and how you think about it and how you use them to make your own business decisions. So you showed kind of your own, whether handwritten or digital resources. Kyla shared several templates, and we have a few resources that for folks live, I'll put in the chat. And if you're watching the recording, they'll be as part of the recording notes. But we have templates and checklists of the records that you need on the VOF website. Kyla recently did a really great 15-minute video to explain livestock feed and how to calculate dry matter intake and demand. And then there are some other really great resources out there that explain what needs to happen, what needs to be included for each record. So I have those listed as well. The organic website down at the bottom there. If you click around, there's some other really great webinars on various topics, as well as record keeping. And the Transition to Organic Partnership Program, the second one from the top. We have all sorts of resources we've been compiling throughout the country, the different regions that are working on that project. So I'll plop those in the chat shortly. So our last slide just wraps it up. I'm Zia with NOFA Vermont. I am our organic practices specialist. So I don't work for a certifier, but I am co-workers with Kyla, who works for Vermont Organic Farmers. And as she said at the beginning, is a certification specialist specializing in livestock. So do please reach out to us with any questions at any time.